Good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of ACRO, we want to welcome you to our monthly Edge user group. Per usual, we're going to let folks settle in, take a virtual seat, and you'll notice we now have music. So hopefully you guys can jam out a little bit to that while we wait for folks to settle in. We'll jump into our little tech spiel as we usually do, and then I'll pass the mic to our panelists for today. But again, for those of you guys just joining, thanks for being here with us today. This is a pretty good count for Sim. I was nervous to see who was going to come in because we also have our Sim meeting going on, but 72 is looking kind of hot. That's awesome. Alrighty, so we'll go ahead and get started. Again, on behalf of ACRO and our international team here at ACRO, we want to welcome you guys into our monthly Edge user group for November. Oh, I love the comments. Yeah, please definitely let us know where you guys are joining in from, and we will go ahead and get started. For those of you guys who haven't used Zoom before, which I know are probably very few of you at this point, I just want to point you down to the features on the very bottom of the screen, which include our chat features and our Q&A features. And this is how you guys can communicate with us. The chat features more for conversation, whereas the Q&A, I think that's kind of self-explanatory, is where you're going to drop your questions in a way that they won't get lost. And towards the end is when we're going to have time for questions. So that's when we'll go back and circle around to the questions, and we should have plenty of time today. Belma, if you can click to the next slide. I'm really excited. We've got a great number of moderators today, but our hosts for the afternoon are my immediate colleagues, Drew Carlisle, Julia, and Dave. Welcome in, guys. If you can go to the next slide for me, please. Thank you. And I'm going to pass the mic over to Julia to introduce the IESC board. Julia, thanks for being here.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here. And hello to everyone from my basement in Fairfax, Virginia. I'd like to point out that ACRO Edge utilizes the expertise and the contributions of the International Education Standards Council. That's how this all becomes possible. And to recognize the chair of that committee, Jasmine Saidi Kunert. She is unfortunately not with us today, but we do have some wonderful other members. We have Shelby Kearley here, Robert Watkins, and Emily Say. Anybody else here? Just speak up and let us know. Next slide, Belma. So I mentioned that ACRO Edge utilizes the expertise of the International Education Standards Council, and they review and update our recommendations. They represent colleges and universities, as well as third-party credential evaluation service, and they have years and years, decades and decades of expertise. So we're grateful for them and the work that they do and the volunteer willingness that they have to help make Edge the best that it can be. Next slide.
Not decades and decades, Julia. I mean, we're decades for sure.
Well, decades and decades, right, Robert? And Dave. Anyhow, our agenda for today is upcoming, and here you see that we're going to talk about ladders. We have some exciting news and updates concerning the Edge ladders, and we're going to specifically look at 3 of those. We're also going to update you on Nepal and the post-basic Bachelor of Nursing. And I see we have Namibia on there. I'm not sure if we're doing that one or not, but we're also going to talk to you about some other exciting things that have gone on this week because, as you may know, this week is International Education Week. And so we'll tell you about a few things that have gone on and that we've taken part in this week. And then we'll go on to tell you about a few other things that ACRO offers that we'd like you to know about. I do believe we have a poll ready to go.
Yes,
is that true?
I'm going to launch it right now.
We launch a poll at every Edge user group meeting, and this one is no different. So the questions are, number 1, are you an Edge subscriber? Either yes or no. Number 2 is this your first user group? Yes or no. And number 3 being, what segment do you represent? Are you institutional staff, evaluation service, a government, or a law firm? Host and panelists cannot vote, guys, so are presenting, just back off the poll. And you that are voting, go ahead and put your votes in now. We'll give you another 20 or 30 seconds to do so.
So we were thinking that for this user group, it's just a little bit before American Thanksgiving here. And one of the things that we're thankful for is all the great research that has been done on these ladder projects. It's International Week, as we just mentioned, and we really wanted to showcase something that we think is going to be really valuable for everyone as it's coming along. And we just kind of picked a few different educational systems that might just represent a little bit of things that you'll see in some various ladders. Just real excited to share that with y'all, and we'll talk more about it in just a second. But did we get those poll results?
We do have them in. We had about 91% participation, which is amazing.
Excellent.
92 now. Let's go. So we're going to end the poll and launch the results so that everybody can see them.
Wow, 99%.
You guys know.
Of you are Edge subscribers.
You guys know.
That's awesome. Wonderful.
Oh, but we
Thank
have
you.
a lot of people who are here for the first time for our user group, which is exciting. The 14 of you guys, welcome.
Well, welcome, and please come back. We love having you here. We love hearing your input and your questions, and it's what makes this whole webinar really a good one for us and for you as well, I think. And then what segment of the profession do you represent? It looks like about 85% of you, 84% are from an institution, 13% from an evaluation service, and we have 2 people from the government. Thank you for being here, whoever you are. We're glad you're here, and bring some friends next time along. We like having you here as well. Okay, we can go ahead and close that poll, and from there we'll go on, and I am going to turn it over to Drew, I believe.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
So on the next slide, one of the things that we're going to be getting into are all of those latest content updates. On the next slide, we show one of the things that we like to do with whenever we make these updates is we'll go in and we will send out an alert to anyone that has saved a particular country or education system. You can log into your account. You can mark it if you need an update on, say, India, or you need an update on Kenya. When we make an update to a placement advice for recommendation on a given credential, when we change something in grading scales, or when we get that new ladder published, all of those would be notifications that are going to come to you when you use this bookmark feature. Now, just a little while ago, we were talking about some of those great questions that spark all of the research that happens here. When you submit a question to the IESC, we encourage you to go ahead and tag that country or educational system, because then you're going to get notified when the IESC comes around and is able to address whatever your question or update was. So go into the Edge user guide, any page within Acro Edge. Along that top menu, there's one that says user guide, and on the right-hand side, it'll walk you through, show you a great video on how to use those bookmarks. It's real intuitive. Once you get into Edge, you just click in the upper right-hand corner, and that locks it right in for you. So on the next slide, we're actually going to get into a little bit more about some of the changes that have been happening within Edge. And so for this, let me pass it over to one of the members of our International Education Standards Council. Here's Emily Say.
Excuse me. Whoa, got a little excited there. Okay, hi everyone from sunny Los Angeles. I'm going to be reporting on 2 credentials that we've been working on in the IESC. The first one being Nepal. Now, the post-basic Bachelor of Nursing is actually already in Edge, but there have been some questions from time to time about the credential advice. The post-basic Bachelor of Nursing is actually 2 to 3 years in duration, depending on the university offering it. And what we've done is we've recommended a US bachelor's degree equivalency. However, that has caused some head scratching, because when you talk about the 3-year Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Science, BCom, et cetera, in Nepal, instead there is a 90 semester credit equivalency recommended. So that causes some confusion, because they don't exactly line up when the PBBN is only 2 to 3 years in duration, and it gets a US bachelor's degree equivalency. Next slide, Belma. Great. So what we've done is we've beefed up the credential author notes section to provide more context. In Nepal, there are actually two routes to become a general nurse. One way is to do the proficiency certificate in nursing, which is 3 years after grade 10. Alternatively, you can do the Bachelor of Science in Nursing, which is 4 years at a university after high school or grade 12. Now, this might be a little bit surprising for some of you because one can become a nurse by pursuing secondary vocational education program, or they can pursue a 4-year university program. But this pattern of having alternate routes at different educational levels can be seen in nursing in a few countries, actually. And in the United States, one can become a nurse either by doing an associate's degree or a Bachelor of Science in Nursing. Now, they're both secondary, but they are different. One's at a junior community college, the other one is at a university. Both allows you to become a nurse in the United States. The main difference is that for the bachelor's degree holders in nursing, usually they are eligible to handle more administrative managerial duties and they get a higher pay rate, so to speak. So that's what happens in Nepal, the proficiency certificate in nursing or the Bachelor of Science in Nursing. So what they've done is they've also created a post-basic Bachelor of Nursing, which is a shortened bachelor's degree program for holders of the proficiency certificate in nursing. Now, those with the PCN, because they already have prior knowledge and experience in general nursing, regardless of whatever level that may be, because they have prior experience and knowledge in nursing, they're able to do that shortened bachelor's degree program. And the idea is that it's kind of like a top up or an upgrade, so to speak, so that when they come out, they will have the same status as the holders of the 4-year Bachelor of Science in Nursing. So for that reason, we have the equivalency recommendation also for a US Bachelor's degree in Nursing. So that's what's happened. And we just beefed up the author notes to provide more context for why that is.
Emily, can I jump in here?
Please do. Thanks, Robert.
I just wanted to sort of reiterate what Emily's saying and point out the obvious, I think, for much of our audience, and that is, there's no question that the credential methodology followed in EDGE is essentially the year counting model, not the benchmarking model by and large, although sometimes there's a combination of the two, but largely we're year counters. And that's evidenced by the fact that a 3-year bachelor's degree from Nepal or India is not considered comparable to US bachelor's. It's only 3 years of undergraduate study. So that raises the question, based on what Emily just told everyone, that that why would we, when you put all the, when you count the years, why are we saying that either a 2-year or 3-year post-basic top-up BSc would be considered comparable to US bachelor's? I, in fact, raised that very question about 2 months ago when this came up. And so Emily immediately jumped on it and explained to me what I needed to know that enabled me to accept that. Because first of all, at UT Austin, I'm not going to give even a year of credit for that 3-year proficiency certificate in nursing beyond 10th grade. I know that it's a 13th year. Some may do it. That's fine, but I'm not going to. So already, this post-basic bachelor's holder is a year short. Second thing, then they do a 2-year, let's say. Let's just say it's a 2-year. Then we're looking at, in my way of thinking, 2 years total post-secondary equivalent education. Therefore, why am I not calling this an associate's degree? And the answer is, Robert, it doesn't matter how long it took. The outcome, the Bachelor of Science Nursing, is the same for that individual in the post-basic program following the proficiency certificate as the individual who came out of 12th grade and did a 4-year BSN program. The BSN is a 4-year degree. How you get there doesn't matter so long as you get the degree. And that was good enough for me. I accept Emily's reasoning. And so we're not going to change the credential advice. Back to you, Em.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, so as Robert mentioned, we are year counters, but we also take other factors into consideration. For example, the minimum entrance requirement, what it gives access to, the purpose behind the program. So those things are definite considerations. And as we mentioned, the whole idea is that it gives holders of the proficiency certificate in nursing the same status as the 4-year BSNs in Nepal. And we do make the 4-year BSN Nepal equivalent to a US bachelor's degree in nursing. So in that way, we do line up and we are consistent. Okay, so that's it for Nepal. Let's move on to Namibia. Next slide, please. Okay, so this one is actually a work in progress and you won't find it in EDGE yet, but you will find it in the coming weeks. We're still working on finalizing the NSSC. What happened was a couple of months ago, there was actually a question that was raised in the International Activities ACRO listserv about the grading scales for the Namibia credential. And so when we went in to look at what was currently showing in EDGE, we realized that there are some updates that needed to be done. So there's the pre-2021 version, and then there's the post-2021 version. So right now we're going to talk about what we see when it's 2020 and before. When we're talking about the, oh, not yet. Let's go back to the, yes, thank you. So for the Namibia Senior Secondary Certificate, or NSSC, subjects can be taken at 2 levels, the ordinary level or the higher level, which are abbreviated respectively as the NSSCO and the NSSCH. At the end, this represents completion of secondary school, which is a total of 12 years of elementary and secondary education in Namibia. Now on to the next slide. Thank you. So this NSSC with the ordinary levels and the higher levels were actually first awarded in 2007. Before that, students often took the Cambridge IGCSEs, or even before that, the Cambridge Overseas School Certificate. But understandably, Namibia wanted to have its own secondary credential. So with the help of Cambridge Assessment International Education, they developed the NSSC, which was first awarded in 2007. It's awarded by the Namibian Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture in collaboration with Cambridge. So what you'll see at this sample document here on the right, you have the MOE's logo at the top, but at the bottom you have the signatures of both the MOE and Cambridge, and then below that Cambridge's logo as well. So there is a partnership here in terms of the development and the award of the credential. Next slide. So when I say there's a partnership or it's done in collaboration with Cambridge, what does that mean? It means that Cambridge helped them and provided support in their developing of the syllabi and in terms of developing the structure for the administration and award of the credential. But the Namibians, they are the ones who administer the examinations. And what Cambridge does is they also help deal with the quality assurance piece and making sure that it's properly benchmarked at the same level as their own credentials. So the ordinary level subjects on the NSSC is benchmarked at the level of the IGCSEs. And if you remember from a previous presentation, whenever we say IGCSEs, we are actually referring to the ones awarded by Cambridge because it's been trademarked by Cambridge. And then the higher levels are benchmarked at the level of the HIGCSEs, or the Higher International General Certificate of Secondary Education. What are the HIGCSEs? We're going to just take a little history tour here. The HIGCSEs actually were awarded by Cambridge also and existed from the mid-1990s to about the late 2000s. And you normally found them in the southern part of the African continent. So what was happening is, if you see the countries neighboring South Africa, a lot of times students would take the IGCSEs, but if we are familiar with the British pattern of education, that's completion of grade 11. And in South Africa, they don't require A levels, but their education system at the time led to the senior certificate, which is 12 years. So what Cambridge did was they developed and offered the HIGCSEs, which is an additional year of study, which technically represents, for the year counters among us, completion of grade 12. So that made them eligible, or more eligible, for university entry in South Africa, which has more university options. And that was a great deal, because that meant not having to do an additional 2 years instead of A levels. So to recap, ordinary levels on the NSSC are at the same level of Cambridge's IGCSEs, and higher levels are at the same level as their Cambridge's HIGCSEs. At the end of the day, there's one certificate that's awarded, and it lists subjects that are taken at both levels. Okay, on to the next slide. So now we fast forward to 2021, which was last year, and they phase out the higher level examinations. Instead, what they do is they introduce advanced subsidiary level examinations. I knew I was going to get tongue-tied here, which are abbreviated as NSSCAS. The ordinary levels did remain, but instead what's happening here is they have 2 separate certificates issued. So after year 11, it's the ordinary levels, and then after year 12, it's the AS levels. And the AS levels are regarded as being the same level as the Cambridge AS levels. So it's although it's also year 12, like the higher levels, it's slightly higher in the level and the content, if you will, in terms of knowledge and whatnot for the AS levels. Now, it still has yet to be determined if they're going to be doing their own A levels. I think that's the general idea, but right now they're just concentrating on their AS levels since they've only done this 1 year out. On to the next slide, please. Thank you. So back in the old days when it was ordinary levels and higher levels, what happened was, to sit for the exam, they usually had to sit for a minimum of 6 subjects at some sort of combination of ordinary levels and higher levels. Now we have ordinary levels and AS levels, and they're separated out, right? Because they're separate certificates that are issued. So what happens is they have to take a minimum of 3 O-level subjects to move on to the AS levels. And those subjects have to be the same subjects that they plan to pursue at AS level. And they should have a minimum grade of C. As far as AS levels are concerned, they usually do a minimum of 3 subjects or a maximum of 5 for the AS levels. Now, when I was in communication with the various authorities, no matter if it was the Ministry of Education or the National Institute of Educational Development or even Cambridge International, I kept asking, what are the minimum subject pass requirements, minimum subjects required to get into university? Because it's one thing in terms of sitting for the examination and the award of the certificate. It's another thing for what universities look for admission purposes. And what they kept stressing to me, all of them, was that it's not really in terms of subject passes. You know, when we think of the British system, we're like, okay, they normally need a minimum of 2 to 3 A levels. Now in Namibia, there's actually a point system. And it's slightly different for each university, but the concept is the same. So what happens is the minimum number of points required will vary depending on the program. For example, the most common pattern for admission into a bachelor's degree is a minimum of 5 subjects, some kind of combination of O levels and higher levels, or O levels and AS levels, some combination where it's a minimum of 25 points for the bachelor's degree. Now, if it's just a certificate program, then it might be 20 points a minimum versus a 25-point minimum. For the bachelor's degree, among those 5 subjects, English must be included with a minimum of an O-level grade of D. Whereas if it's just a certificate, it also has to include English, but it's a minimum level, O-level grade of E. So you can see where the variations occur there. Now, if it's a medical program, the MBBS, instead the minimum shoots up, and they need a minimum of, say, 35 points, for example. So this chart here that we have is an example of one from the Namibia University of Science and Technology, but it's fairly similar. There's some variations, but the idea is that the higher the level, subject level, and the higher the grade, the more points allocated for the student. So this brings me back to the original question that was posed on International Activities Listserv, and that is, what is the grading scale? So there are three different grading scales depending on the subject level here. So for the ordinary levels, to no surprise, it's actually the exact same grading scale that you'll see with the IGCSE. So it's A star through G. What's interesting though is that with this point system, they don't give any points for G, which is the lowest passing grade. University of Namibia, I think, won't even give any points for F. Whereas here, NUST will give 2 points for an F grade on the O levels. For the higher levels, it's a much smaller scale or tier system. It's 1 through 4, 1 being the highest and 4 being the lowest passing grade. And then for the AS levels, it's A through E, and they stress that it's A through E lowercase to differentiate it from the ordinary levels. And then again, A being the highest, E being the lowest passing. The truth is they don't really have a mark for a failing grade because, like with the British system, if it's a failing grade, it's ungraded, I'm putting that in air quotes, and it won't even show up on the certificate itself. But hopefully that provides some context for Namibia and their senior secondary certificate. Thanks. I think this goes back to Drew now, maybe. On to the next slide.
That's the way that I was planning it. Emily, thank you so much for going over that. So it looks like this is one of those things that as we continue to see more of this, this is the kind of thing that will be updated throughout EDGE. But again, as I mentioned earlier, bookmarking countries that you submit questions on is the best way to ensure you're going to get notified when the IESC reaches back out. If we move on to the next slide, we're going to start talking about the Ladders project. And if you guys have gone through EDGE, you've noticed that when you open up a given credential, just to the right of it, there is a clickable PDF of a ladder, an educational ladder, that allows you to kind of place into context what you're looking at. But what we want to do is to make that even easier for everyone by having one standard look that's going to go all the way through to have one approach that you'll always be able to expect when you're clicking on there. For example, the old India ladder has a whole lot more steps indicated than you're going to see moving forward. And I'm not sure how well this is showing up for all of you on your screens there at home or wherever you are. But what I want you to see is that we are trying to very clearly demonstrate those two pathways. You can see, I'm going to scoot back a little bit. Out of that upper secondary box, that little blue box there, you can see there are two arrows coming out. We're trying to show there's two primary pathways that you can get to once you achieve that credential. We're going in there and we're reflecting the names of all of these credentials with their native names when we can. We don't think it's going to be too helpful for all of you to come across characters, languages that you may be unfamiliar with. We will be using English in South Korea, for example. The goal with all of this is to show the various pathways. But a lot of this information, you're going to need to find out by still going and referencing the credential itself. If there are little author notes, that's not going to be able to be expressed here on the ladder. Dave is one of my colleagues. Dave Mahali is one of my colleagues who's working on this with me. Dave, do you have anything that you'd like to sort of add in about how we're philosophically approaching this project and why we really want to highlight it here during International Week?
Yeah, thanks, Drew. Just maybe a little bit of historical and philosophical background. In keeping with the earlier chat trend, greetings from snowy Wisconsin. It's always daunting to follow Emily, who's the champion acronym juggler for all of us, and is always excellent, but I'll give her a shot here. Bonus trivia before we get started. I hope you'll forgive me, but the state of New York used to have a high school pathway toward registered nurse status. However, the examination for that was passed by very few of the high school pathway nursing students. In any case, onto the ladders. We've been having, you know, issues with ladders for the history of EDGE, I would say. There are a lot of different ladders in different formats. Some countries still don't have ladders. And we started working on it a few years ago in fits and starts. But this year, toward the end of spring, beginning of the summer, we decided to really allocate funding and found somebody willing to take on the very daunting task of making EDGE ladders in a consistent form, down to the wording and the terminology and the way that was used. We also insisted that they should be unique and not derivative of other extant ladders. There are a lot of excellent ladders out there, and we just didn't want to be copying ladders when we could maybe, you know, come up with something that fit EDGE a little bit better. Anyway, it's a big project, you know, hundreds of countries, and we're going to have hundreds of ladders up, really within, you know, the foreseeable future, at least within our immediate lifetimes. The one other thing to add, that the ladders are somewhat more controversial than I would have thought. Some people don't like a ladder being there because they think it draws attention away from the text and the explanatory things that come from the research. I understand that. I think part of it comes from the difficulty of producing ladders and maintaining them after you've published them and updating them. But we believe strongly that having a graphical representation is beneficial and appreciated by EDGE users. If I can go to a ladder and just get my answer quickly rather than reading a couple pages of text, I guarantee you I'm going to go to the ladder, even though I love my old dusty books that aren't that relevant anymore. But that's just a background of the ladder issue. It's much easier now with the technology and software to make adjustments to the ladders. Drew and I were making some fairly substantial changes just this morning, and it took very little time at all. And so we'll be able to respond to your comments, you know, using the EDGE contact form and things when you see things that you think maybe, you know, aren't correct or need to be fixed or updated or added. You know, we're living in fear of some accent, you know, becoming apparent that we missed every time. So it's a work in progress, but we're pretty excited, and maybe we'll take a look at one or two of them.
Yeah, Dave, the quickest way to get the right answer on the internet is to publish something that's incorrect. I can tell you that. Yeah, I did see a question that came in about, can we zoom in a little bit on what's going on? So I think we're in presentation mode, so I don't think we can do that. We're going to look to see if there's a way that I can share my screen at the end of all of this, so that I could show you a couple of those examples. But I'm not sure if we have the ability to do that until the quote presentation is done. I don't know if we can do that yet, but we're working on it. And this will be published quickly within EDGE. I'm talking, you know, days. So this is another kind of thing that would be useful for you to bookmark for Mexico, Taiwan, and what else do we have? Saudi Arabia are right in the pipeline to be up. So soon. What is our next slide, by the way, Belma? Yeah, unfortunately, there's no way for us to really get in here, but again, it's just yeah, showing them that, that this is the kind of thing we're trying to represent, that there is a crossover. You can see some of the yellow over into the white. There are lots of education systems where there are ways that you can leave from a more vocational or technical stream and still enter back into the more academic stream. We want to reflect those common pathways, and that's something that you're seeing here. And if you can look over to the left-hand side, you can see another one of those examples where in between the blue and the red, in between upper secondary and post-secondary, where there's kind of that fork going off, where you have choices that are going to be reflected in what the student decides to do. So all of these ladders, this is something that we are going to be publishing. They're going to be published in a rolling fashion, coming out over time. We want to be sure that all of you get updated on all of this. But my best suggestion would be that when you log into Edge on the homepage, if you don't want to bookmark every single country, at the bottom where you can scroll through and look through the most recent updates, you'll be able to see when we add that new ladder in right from the homepage of Edge, just if you log in and want to see what's new. So what else do we have? I'm pretty sure we've got one more. It's Taiwan is one of the things. I recognize it. I remember how a little bit of this went, but Dave, do you have anything that you want to mention about any of the ladders in particular? Some of the things that we were trying to highlight. I know that in the education system of Taiwan, there are some distinctions between that and the rest of China, and so we wanted to highlight those changes specifically.
Yeah, I'm still struggling to get my view options down into control so that I can get it back into the original size here. That did work, but it ended up I zoomed my ladder right off the screen. Yeah, one of the things, for instance, the change that we had made in Taiwan this morning, just to get into the nitty gritty, was to take a look at how they had the graduate degrees represented in terms of numbers of years. The way it is now, which is not the way we had changed it, but we have the old way up here for now. The 1 to 4 years for the master's degree certificate really reflects information from the Taiwanese, ministry that various published sources have this, that, people take 1 to 4 years to do their master's. People take 2 to 7 years to do their doctorate degree. It's not the minimum length, it's not the normal length. I mean, think of Germany, it used to take 15 years to get, the first diploma. So if you wanted to. So we have it here. We're gonna, I think, standardize it to a 1+ for the master, 2+ designation. So it will just indicate that it's minimum of X years plus, possible more. But those are the kind of things that come up. I had worked on this ladder for a while after it had already been done. I did not produce the ladder. We have excellent people handling that in the background also. But everything that comes up, we check. And so we want the basic rule to be that the years that we reflect are the standard minimum, and then an indication with the plus sign of it can take longer. There was, we don't have the Cuba ladder here for you today, but there was an issue there with a 1-year master's degree. I hadn't ever seen a 1-year master's from Cuba, so I really just had to go to every Cuban university whose website was operating, go into the post, graduate study tabs until I found one. And there are a lot of computing type of 1-year technical university masters in computing. So learning a lot as we go through this. But as Drew had intimated, this really is going to be like a snowfall. You'll get a few ladders at a time, and a few more will roll out, and eventually you'll have feet and feet of ladders. So that's basically where we are with that. Many ladders are currently blocked out and ready for review, and we're just taking the time to go through them. We don't want to really miss anything, so it's kind of a time-consuming process, but we're going to get them all up, and they'll be available, and they'll all be in the same format, which is, I think, the best thing that we could have done is just to standardize it.
Yeah. So Taiwan, for example, it's one of those things. You mentioned all of that research is going in to make sure we're not going to miss anything. In this older version that you're seeing right now that doesn't have all of the new research reflected, I have 2 screens up and I can see what the new one is, but the new one, we talk about that distinction when the joint university entrance exam changed in 2002 over to that new system of diversified admissions. We talk about that just a little bit. It's graphically indicated there for you so you can still understand that. We are showing where there are some of those entrance examinations, and when they're not even mandatory, we're showing how students can still enter into university without that examination. We are going through and talking about, like Dave was saying, taking the official information and we are making sure to distill it down into something that is going to be useful for what you have coming across your desk. So as he was saying, officially it says 1 to 4 years. If you go and you looked on a Taiwanese website talking about the education system, for you, that means it's going to be 1 year or longer. It's those kinds of things that we're trying to simplify this to make it so that you can reference this ladder and gain a lot of information very quickly from it. And we're really excited to get to roll this out for you. On to the next. So some other things that I guess we should be talking about. Julia, I'm going to hand this one right over to you. I'm not going to do it any kind of justice. You have all the words.
All right. Well, I'm just going to recap a little bit on about a month ago, October 23rd to the 28th, a group of 12 higher education reps visited the land of Baden-Württemberg in Germany as part of the Baden-Württemberg seminar. This seminar has been going on for 40 years, and we'll see a bit about that in a minute, but there's a QR code up there, and that QR code will take you to the latest edition of Acro Connect, where you can read 5 days of diary entries by various attendees of the seminar. So I think it's really gives you a great overview of what was involved in the seminar, and there's a few photos here. One, the church that you're looking at with the scaffolding around it and all the tents below it, that's a view from the hotel where we stayed in Ulm. We were in a brand new hotel. It had opened about 5 days before we arrived, that looked right out on the Münsterplatz, and it was absolutely spectacular. And there's a picture of the whole group right in front of that wearing our the land masks, which the Ministry of Baden-Württemberg has rebranded itself to the land. Germany is made up of 13 states or Länder, and so Baden-Württemberg is one of those. The photo on the right is in Tübingen, which is an ancient, beautiful city founded, I think, in the 12th century. The university was founded, I think, in the 1470s. It's primarily a comprehensive humanities university. We had a beautiful day there, beautiful lunch there. So it's a week of really learning about the German education system and the various types of institutions that they have in Germany. Let's go to the next slide. And so here are a few more pictures. As you can see, the 40th anniversary, the ministry brought balloons. We met with them on, I believe it was Wednesday in Stuttgart. So representatives from the Ministry of Science, Research, and Arts came down and brought the balloons, and they brought 40th anniversary celebration cookies, which I'm going to hold one up to my camera so you can see. They gave to each of us on a string, and really wanted to celebrate this partnership that the ministry has had with ACRO and NASA for 40 years. So the first group went in 1982. I believe Emily told me she went in at the 25th anniversary, so 15 years ago. Is that right, Emily? And I think Robert was there for the 30th anniversary, so it's been going on for a long time. It really is a wonderful opportunity to learn about the German education system, and to just meet some wonderful colleagues. We ended up being a very compatible group. And on that particular day, we actually went to the Mercedes-Benz Museum, which was quite interesting, and right next to the Stuttgart soccer stadium. And so that was fun too. So I really encourage you to think about applying. We tend to get a good number of applications every year, but you don't have to have German language background to apply and be on the seminar. So I believe our applications usually open up in usually right after the ACRO annual meeting or right at the time of the ACRO annual meeting. Shelby, you were on it too, so I don't know what year you were there.
I was there on the 25th year.
Oh, Emily, were you there at the same time as Shelby? Were you guys there at the same time?
No.
or- Okay, different years. Okay. But
Sorry,
yeah,
I have trouble unmuting my, my button. It's that darn mouse. I went in 2003, believe it or not. Yeah, it was amazing. And as Shelby said in the chat, we recommend it to everyone to apply. It never hurts. And I know at the ACRO conference, normally every year, there's a session that talks about the BW seminar and how to apply.
yeah. And you will make good, solid networking relationships that will last and last. So by all means, I encourage you to consider attending. Next slide. And then here are just some highlights. This was the first time actually that we were in person, because in 2021 we had a virtual seminar. In 2020 it was canceled. So the first time in 3 years that we were all there together, which was really special. We also went, and this was a lot of fun, we went to a variety of education institutions, but on the last day we went to a school for 5th to 12th graders, the Hans and Sophie Schul School, and it was really wonderful. We had a we had a little contest on the US. I think it was on Alaska actually. And unfortunately, our attendees were out for blood and they ended up winning and got the whole bag of candy, but we did share with all the students. So it was a great opportunity to visit with them and to just really see what a school was like in Germany. So please consider again. I think the applications actually open in April, but they close in June. Decisions are made usually in July and students notified late July to August. And then the seminar usually takes place in between September, October. So great time to be, a beautiful time to be in Germany. Okay, on to the next slide. At this point, I'm going to just tell you a little bit about what we did for, what we have been doing for International Education Week. We had a webinar on Tuesday, and this was a great webinar because it was how your campus can make a difference for refugees and displaced persons. But what was special about this webinar, and this has been a space that ACRO has worked in for a long time, but what was special about this one is that it really was spotlighting student-led work that's been done at George Washington University and Georgetown University here in the Washington, D.C. area. It was really a chance for them to talk about what they've done, how they've worked on developing a welcoming campus initiative, focusing on really working to get the administration and their institutions to look at how to promote flexible admissions, how to assist students hoping to get a full tuition and room and board scholarship for one student each year, and all the partnerships that they've made to try to make that happen. And really it's an effort to try and get other institutions to think about really initiating these sorts of programs. The idea that this was student-led was really kind of a very special, neat thing. And they did highlight some of the work that's been done at other institutions in the same way. So you can listen to that recording. There's the QR code for it, but I think you'll be amazed at the work that they put into this to try to make this happen, and just an inspiring way for us to sort of share the work that's being done right in our sort of backyard, but also by students. So that was a special event for us. Next slide. And I think I'm turning it over to Drew at this point.
You are indeed, Julia. I'll just go over pretty quickly a couple of things that ACRO is offering. I do see that we have a few questions here. Friendly reminder, there is the ACRO profile page within ACRO Edge is free right now. If you are not a subscriber, I believe I saw that everybody except for one that's attending today was already a subscriber. But if you are not a subscriber, there are we've opened that up because we want to make it, we want to eliminate those barriers where we can. That's something that ACRO is trying to do. On the next page, we've got a couple other things that ACRO is working on that next slide. I know that one of the things that we really wanted to talk about, in addition to Ukraine, were some of the different courses that you can sign up for. We are working back towards, as Julia mentioned, we had some virtual events when we couldn't do in-person events. And we are working towards getting back to some in-person training events. But for right now, we don't have those dates established yet. So we offer these courses that you can take from wherever you are, and they wind up with a badge at the end, so you can demonstrate that you have that knowledge if you ever need to show it to anybody. And on the next slide, I do just want to remind everyone that we do have the Gloria Nathanson Fund, which is something where we support research when you can put together something like a full country profile, some white papers that you've done your research on, just a way to spread that information and get it out to the greater field. Just wanted to touch on a couple of those things. At the end of this slide deck, there are all the QR codes for if you're interested in signing up for Connect, our free newsletter. If you are going to be joining at the International Activities Group, Christina gave a link to that earlier in the chat, but that's a place where you can pose questions about your process with other colleagues. The IESC, the International Education Standards Council, that works on all these placement recommendations, they are not going to be able to answer your individual evaluation questions. They're zooming out and they're thinking about the bigger picture on how do I understand this from that, that high level view. But to answer some specific questions, I do want to bring Julia and any members of the IESC back on right now so that we can talk about some of these things. Julia, would you moderate through some of our questions and point those out?
I sure will. So first question, pretty straightforward one, and Emily, I'll let you go ahead and answer it. Can you please confirm what was said earlier? IGCSE is equivalent to grade 11, ?
Yes, so this brings us back to that question about benchmarking versus year counting. When we're talking about secondary level credentials, there are a number of educational systems that end at grade 11. The British-based system with GCSEs and IGCSEs is one of them. So it's equivalent to when you're counting completion of grade 11 or year 11, but it does mark the end of the secondary education cycle. And they can continue on to some types of education. But if you're talking about university specifically, normally you do have to do an additional 2 years. So that's 11 plus 2, making it 13. So that leads to A levels, and then that would grant them admission to university specifically. And for us Americans, we liken that to AP credit.
Okay, thank you. I have a question. I'm going to try and read this through. I will say that in first, it has to do, actually, I think the rest of the questions has disappeared. On Nigeria, I see the last part of it that says it's a document from.
I'm sorry, I answered that one.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Okay. I have a couple of questions on Myanmar. I have a question about Myanmar. I have a transcript that is a matriculation exam, but I don't see that mentioned on EDGE. Would this be comparable to a basic education standard 10 exam, diploma A, B, or the certificate of education? Dave, I want you to chime in here with me as well, but I will tell you this, that around 2002, Myanmar transitioned from a 10-year elementary secondary sequence to an 11-year sequence to mark the end of the secondary education cycle. There was a national education plan that came out from 16 to 21 that was really looking to adjust that to a 12-year system. But as you know, the situation in Myanmar is dire. And basically the entire education system has imploded. And there's probably a generation that will be without any form of education for quite some time. So let's start there. Dave,
I don't have much.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
You did a good job on that. I mean, could we transition to the medical one maybe?
Sure.
Full disclosure, I'm not an IESC member, but I am familiar with the conversation and decision behind these. Because of the 10-year system in Myanmar, as opposed to grade 10 in the Philippines, which had extra hours added to for various years. So we won't get into the weeds there. But I think the decision was number one. Edge never makes an MD, U.S. style Doctor of Medicine degree equivalency. We speak in terms of first professional degrees in medicine. MD is very specific, implies accreditation, by the AMA of the medical school and many other things. Usually a 3+4 or a 4+4 type of situation. So we don't say MD, but the reason it wasn't totted up to comparability of a first professional degree was simply because that they didn't think that it met the standard because of the grade 10 entrance requirement for the 6.5-year, I believe it was, medical program, which had 1 year of rotating housemanship or clerkship for the degree. So it was just an insufficient preparation in terms of the upper secondary training to go in. And anybody who wants to jump in and with more background, feel free.
Okay, Dave, I will, because I was in the minority on this one. I disagreed. I felt that it should be first professional degree. We know that there are medical degrees in the world that are as little as 4 years. Mexico immediately comes to mind, 4 years of in-class time plus a year. Mexican students all undergraduate Mexican students have to do 6 months social service. The difference is in health professions, particularly medicine, it's a 1 year, and that constitutes their rotating internships and so on. So to me, there's an example of something comparable to what's going on in Myanmar. I also disagreed with what I call soaking off years of post-secondary education to compensate for some sort of deficient upper secondary level or middle secondary. In the case of Philippines, it was always 7th and 8th that was missing, not 9, 10, 11, and 12. But I was opposed to the final outcome, but I lost, just as I lost in Cameroon. So, but to answer our question, person who posed the question, yeah, what Dave said is exactly what the reasoning was for the other members of the IESC in terms of calling that a Bachelor of Medical Sciences as opposed to first professional degree in medicine, i.e. MD by any other name.
Right. And it's a good opportunity to point out that the EDGE comparability statements are binding on no one. They are advisory in nature. It's really up to institutions to and people working within institutions to kind of wrest power away from whatever nameless structure exists and make decisions based on this kind of information. I'm very sympathetic to Robert's argument there, but you can see how messy a true democracy, which is how the IESC committee goes. If you have a simple majority, it gets hammered out and set in stone, so to speak. But these are guidelines that are designed to try to provide information to make people's lives better or at least easier. However, you should feel free to always gather information, and number one, use the contact EDGE option to ask for a review or to suggest changes, and number two, to use those decisions at your home institutions.
Dave, thanks so much for that, because that's exactly, for example, I mentioned Cameroon, just really quick. EDGE has differential advice for the Francophone licence 3-year and the Anglophone bachelor 3 years, both after 13 years primary, secondary. And I was again in the minority there where I was outvoted. But here at UT Austin, for example, a Cameroonian licence is considered comparable to the US bachelor's degree for purposes of graduate school consideration. So there's an example of me saying, okay, fine, EDGE, I'm going to do something different.
And I would like to just one more thing on Myanmar, and that is to say that the situation there is dire, as I said. So that's one place where we just were talking about having a flexible framework. that's a place where that would really be important, and receiving matriculation exam. Right now, I'm not sure how well that's going to happen. So just keep in mind that this is an area where if you're seeing any students come out of there, that's remarkable. And the situation is such that access to documentation and such is really uncertain.
And in my colleague's defense, let me say that, Julia, that was one of the reasons I think that they went with the more conservative advice there, because of the shaky situation in Myanmar. Cameroon is fast getting there too. So, that might be something to take into consideration as you try to approach that the way I did. At the moment, I'm going to say justice is blind, but we know that Cameroon could become the next Rwanda.
And ACRO does have a lot of resources that are written out for how you can help to develop those policies so you can be consistent with refugees or other displaced individuals. Thank you guys so much. I'm not sure if we're going to see you, but we typically have one of these every third Thursday of the month. Stay tuned, and we'll be in touch if there's going to be one here in December. Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye all.
Thanks, Drew.
My screen is doing the thing again where I can't end the, I don't know what's going on. Ah, where are we at? Okay, now I can do it. Thank you guys again so much for joining. It's been a pleasure being able to chat with you guys. If you guys have any follow-up questions, please feel free to email us directly, and we will see you at the next user group. Thanks again, guys. Take care.